Changeling, Kith analysis. We're a third of the way there, at least to the core book. I'm still undecided on whether or not I want to include some of the splat book changelings, like, say, leprechauns or the 13 Native American fairy spirits. But today we are looking at Pooka. Now, before I begin, elephant in the room. Every role-playing game that I've been a part of, whether in a core book or a splat, has some kind of hyper-annoying character, right? Some kind of horrendous, unreconcilable flaw. And in Changeling, these are the Pooka. The only reason that they are not at the bottom of my list are for things that will become very clear when I cover those at the bottom of my list. Pooka ultimately are harmless. It's just like, if you play them correctly, they're annoying. Right? They're not Kender, like, they're not gonna steal from anybody. They're just gonna prank you, and it's just, it's not great. But I digress. On to the actual look at Pooka. So, the best description to give you, according to the book, is cute. Because that's what we get out of it. No matter what form they choose, Pooka are usually cute. Their appearances are manifold, depending on the nature of their animal affinities, which I'll cover in a bit. They are often furry, with elongated animalistic features, or even actual animal ears. Okay, at least when they're fairies. Obviously, due to their very optimistic, they like to prank people, they have a fear of mundaneness, they're very afraid of banality, more than any other kind of fairy. Pooka are clearly inspired by global tales of shapeshifter trickster spirits. Very easy to explain. Yeah, the book says that they come originally from human dreams of flight and freedom, from watching animals play or something like that. Anyway, let's get right on to it, shall we? The mechanics of the Pooka. So, first and foremost, shape changing. This is the ability of theirs that puts them above the Ishu, in my opinion. Right? Otherwise, the Ishu would be ahead of them. Pooka at character creation have to choose an animal, and it can be any animal. So, their fairy form is going to look like that animal, and their human form is going to act like it just a little bit. But they can shapeshift. For a point of glamour, they get all the mechanical benefits of transforming into whatever they've chosen. No limits out of the core book. Right? Now, granted, it says you're supposed to be very friendly, even in combat, but there is nothing stopping you from playing a tiger shape-shifting Pooka. Or an elephant, if you wanted to get bizarre with it. You'd have to explain it, certainly, but, you know. Okay, so that's that. You have to spend a point of glamour every time you transform. You have to spend a glamour point to transform into the animal. Transforming back is free, and it always takes one turn regardless. What's very interesting is that, so that affects your physical appearance, right? Your fairy seeming, as it were. Sorry, fairy mane, however they say it. But what's also interesting is that mechanically, other changelings can't guess what kind of animal Pooka you are just by looking at you. Alright, so the second ability is Confidant, which is actually really good. Again, this is the second birthright. Confidant. The innate charm of a Pooka breaks down the barriers of even the coldest people. So, Once during a conversation, and it's up to you and your storyteller to determine what a conversation is. Once during a conversation, you get to roll perception plus empathy, or subterfuge, to get a changeling or mortal to spill her guts. The difficulty is the victim's willpower. Each success allows a truthful answer to one personal question. Of course, it specifies, it's not an instantaneous power. It happens over the course of a conversation. And this functions normally at all times, including with mortals. So Confidant is a very interesting ability as well. Like, sure, the Pooka is very annoying, but they're kind of innocent, right? They're, like, naive looking. People trust them for some reason, especially if they don't know what a Pooka is. Alright, so after their birthrights, we'll move on to their frailties. Of course, as usual, there's only one frailty, and this is one of the more annoying aspects of these characters. Lies. People may trust a Pooka, but no one in their right mind would believe one. They are infamous for their elaborate lies, right? This is a mechanical effect. You have to, as a Pooka, roll willpower against a difficulty 8 to tell the whole truth of something. So everything you say has to have a lie mixed into it. It's so bizarre. Like, of course, players are going to get around this. Like, in my old Changeling troop, we had a Pooka who would... he played very against type. He was like a very no-nonsense kind of character that was on his way out, right? He was about to die, functionally. A cranky old man, as it were. And so for his lies, he would say his entire piece, and then instead of rolling willpower at the end of it, he would add, "The sky is red," or something along those lines. Alright, so the final mechanic that Pooka get, their affinity, nature, they are just a little bit better than a lot of other fairies at manipulating nature through their cantrips. Okay, so now, thoughts on player characters. Like I said, they're annoying, but outside of the lies, it's really only in a way of if you play them the way the book tells you to. So they're very childlike, even in Changeling. They're very they're constantly pranking people, but they're doing it in order to spread joy. Again, if you go by the book itself, it tells you that if somebody gets angry at their pranks, they're incapable of understanding why that person is mad, and might even like be very upset or try to make them better through more pranks. So yeah, that's interesting. And this will go on for a little bit because I have one more thing to talk about with that. But so the sorts of chronicles Pooka are good for, believe it or not, as long as you're not running like a very intense courtly intrigue game of all nobles in Changeling, Pooka fit the bill for like pretty much every kind of chronicle you want to run. They do take a little bit of the darkness out of the world of darkness. I have not once played in a session with a Pooka that was dark and gritty because, you know, these people take playing them very seriously. They're running around cracking jokes, which is fine, right? Like, stuff like that has to happen. It's just the nature of the beast. Speaking of the nature of the beast, that was totally unintentional. Speaking of the nature of the beast nowadays, I cannot introduce Changeling to new players nowadays and explain Pooka without people talking about furries. And while that isn't really a can of worms I'd like to open, I was planning on talking about something along those lines anyway because of some conversations I've had with Pathfinder Society players. Uh, yeah, so this game was written in 1995, 96, something along those lines. Let me look, but this was before everybody knew what that was, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with it. And like even at 97, by the way, 1997 for this edition of Changeling. Uh, but yeah, like honestly, if somebody, it's a fantasy game. If somebody wants to play a squirrel man, freaking let him, as long as it's not being weird with it. Like we're already talking about a game where the game is telling him to run around pranking people anyway to make them happy. Right. So those are the Pooka. I should. Oh, right. I've been rating these. I've been forgetting to do that in my Dresden videos. So I would rate the Pooka a 6 out of 9. There are only 3 player character options that I dislike more than the Pooka. And again, I think the Ishu would actually be higher than them if the Pooka's abilities weren't so good, like just from a sheer mechanical standpoint. Alright, as is tradition now. Let's do this. Ooh, a big cluster. Story time. Back in jar. Thanks, me, for just writing story time on a thing. Jeez. Riveting entertainment, I know, everybody. And I saw that one before I drew it. That's not fair either. Out of character and in character jobs in Dungeons and Dragons among player characters. Okay. Shoot. Why not? I'm happy to do that. Alright. Well, thank you very much for watching. Have a fantastic evening. And contrary to everything I've just said today, give Pooka a try if you get the chance to play Changeling. You might be surprised by how much fun you can have. Have a good evening.